Okay, so welcome to Art Now's first spring season event. I want to say a little bit about Art Now. Let's go to the gallery view. So Art Now is a visiting artist series that transcends traditional disciplinary boundaries and embraces provocative works that challenge what we know and what we think we know. It fosters experiential conversations and art making between contemporary artists who work with emergent creative practices, students, and the broader community. The 2020 to 2021 season theme is world building, shaping our futures. So today we are lucky to have Elliot Reed presenting Enter the Facilitatrix, Strategic Soft Power for Collaborative Artists. Hi, Elliot. I'm gonna read Elliot's bio and then I'll hand it over. So Elliot Reed is a performance artist and director based in New York City. Working in real time, Reed creates solos, ensemble performances, and videos that center the live subject. His project exists between people, leveraging candid interaction among performers and audience. Utilizing a choreographic lens, Reed assembles bodies, movement prompts, and narrative within exhibition spaces. As viewers move through their work, the narrative arc moves through them, unfurling itself in actual time. Reed is a 2019 Dance Web Scholar, 2019 to 2020 Artist in Residence at the Studio Museum in Harlem, and recipient of the 2019 Rima Hort Mann Emerging Artist Grant. Recent works include a commission with Jack Quartet, MoMA PS1, the Getty Museum, the Hammer Museum, the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, the Broad, University of Southern California, and performances at Moonstep Tokyo, MNSKTM Osaka, VFD London, and MOOI Collective Mexico City. Thank you for being here, Elliot. Welcome.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for everyone who turned their cameras on too. I'm watching this on gallery view, so anything to help me pretend like I'm in the room with everybody. So I'm really happy to be able to have this time to talk with everybody about my practice and sort of explain different methods that I like to work collaboratively with other people. I kind of titled it in this presentation as soft power, but I'm going to go through a couple recent work examples, kind of share what I'm thinking about and sort of different techniques that I use for engaging other people. And these are tools that can be used either by performers or if you're another kind of artist or writer or anybody that could benefit from working with other people. And I'm a firm believer that everybody can kind of benefit from being in exchange with others. So this is just my way that I'm kind of figuring out how to do it. As far as structure goes, like I said, I'm going to keep this mostly in gallery view. So if someone has a question, it works, you can like maybe physically raise your hand or I guess type it in the chat and maybe Amanda can help me out with reading it. I'm going to go through a few different work samples. So if periodically during the presentation, if you have a question, I'll probably pause after each one. And I'd love to hear from you. So thanks so much for joining me. I'm super happy to be here digitally. And yeah, happy Tuesday. So first off, I'm going to start with a piece from 2018 called Curb Alert. So in 2018, I went to Austin, Texas, from Los Angeles, where I used to live, to participate in a performance festival called Outsider Fest. And I wrote a piece that took place all in real time over the course of the 2 weeks of the festival. So how it worked is I went to Texas for 2 weeks, and over the course of that time, I started collecting text from the Craigslist free stuff section. And just like a show of hands, like who's familiar with the Craigslist free stuff section, or has anybody used it before? It's like, yeah, we're like an artist's best friend. You can get like free furniture, monitors that sometimes work, stuff like that. So I went through that and basically used the language from people's Craigslist ads and started to compile it in a script. And you could think of this process as almost like a diary or like a type of collection in and of itself. Much like people are going through the streets of Austin, Texas, collecting these sort of cast off items, I was going through and kind of collecting these advertisements and because they're not advertisements, they're like classifieds or whatever, but building it into a collective text or a script. So that was happening over 2 weeks, kind of in the background of the festival, because I was performing the last day. And I also found my cast through Craigslist as well. I put out a Craigslist personals ad and basically said, if anyone was available to perform, here's my email, I'll be paying you this much money, and like a brief idea of kind of like what the work is. So I found a couple people that responded to my personals ad. We did a quick phone call, but the final part of the work was that we actually didn't meet until the day of the show. In a way, it's kind of like I'm collecting. Oops, sorry, I think I got muted. I'm not only just collecting the text, but also collecting the performers locally as well, and kind of expanding this notion of like material and also site specificity in a way that relates to performance, which was fun. So I'll pause with that description for right now and then play a little clip from Curb Alert. Let's see.
All right, how's everyone doing? Great, thank you for coming to Outsider 2019. You're about to experience a very unique and special performance by Elliot Reed, Curb Alert. If you haven't had a chance to read the program guide, this performance is scripted from using the free stuff section in Craigslist. And not only that, Elliot also cast several actors using Craigslist. So tonight's performance will also be featuring Floyd Lloyd. Thanks a lot. Without further ado, Curb Alert.
Thank you all so much for coming. Can we have the house lights blue, please? Can we have the house lights orange, please? Can we have the house lights blue, please? Can we have the house lights green, please? Can we have the house lights orange, please? Stark white? Thank you. Thanks again to my two wonderful actors. We have Sylvia Carroll again. And Floyd Lloyd. I just want to let everyone know that we all just met for the first time about an hour and a half ago. They responded to my personals ad. This is for real. Craigslist, yeah. So, thank you both for trusting me, and for you all for trusting me for coming right now. Sylvia, I have a quick question. Do you have a favorite type of pig?
A favorite type of pig? Well, I like all kinds of pigs, but my favorite kind of pig is the Mongolitsa pig because, well, it has like fur almost. It has so much hair that looks like fur.
Yes, I'll take it.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's my favorite type of pig. And
Right, Floyd, again.
Curb Alert. No need to contact. I will remove the post when they are gone. 2 letterback checks.
the answer is no.
Both need new woven seats, rush or rope. One has been sanded and oiled, the other needs some love. 2x4 MDF, cornhole boards, and miscellaneous churned wood. Free boxes in various sizes. Good for moving, storage. We also have air pockets and small amounts of bubble wrap. First come, first served. Email if you're interested in picking them up.
Yes, I'll take it.
Free Maytag dishwasher, built-in 24 inches white.
Yes,
Quiet
I'll
Series
take it.
300. The dishwasher was in condo.
Yes, I'll take
when
it.
I bought my home in 2008.
Yes, I'll
it worked
take it.
fine. But now the
Yes, I'll
display
take
just
it.
says L.
Yes, the answer
I
is
certainly
yes.
hope it will work for you.
The answer is yes.
Easy entry into
The
our
answer is
building.
yes.
Transport via ramps,
I'll take it.
elevator. I
I'll
live
take it.
right downtown.
The answer is yes.
Kind thanks for
The answer is
marriage.
no.
Assorted
no.
living boxes, a
Yes, there
couple
is
of
yes.
wardrobes, a small,
Yes, there is
medium,
yes.
and large box.
The answer is yes.
About 50 altogether, and they'll be picked up by the city on Monday. I will reply to the first 5 responses by 9
Pause
a.m.
for-
Sunday.
Mary had a little lamb in 3, 2, 1. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. Go ahead.
Twin mattress, used but plenty of life left. A couple of stains, but nothing major. Free, used outdoor couch. It's pretty weathered. We're moving and don't want to take
Yes,
it
I'll
with
take
us.
it.
Bed with storage drawers. Free, free, free. Sony Trinitron TV, 34 inches. Beautiful picture. Comes with the stand.
The answer is no.
Very heavy. Bring 2 people to pick it up. Carpet
The answer is
padding,
no.
In good condition. No
The answer is
stains
no.
in the driveway. Feel
The
free to
answer
pick
is no.
up. All or some. Free
Yes,
to
I'll
anyone
take
who
it.
knows how. To uninstall the pump. Not sure if it works or not. Please message me for exact address and
Yes,
what
I'll
time
take
you are
it.
planning to come by. Thanks. 2 kitchen
Yes, I'll
cabinets.
take it.
1 over oven
The
cabinet.
answer is no.
1 range hood. 4 shelves. Free on street. Runs
The
well.
answer is no.
Except display scrambles what's going on, has photo input and analog tone controls, includes factory
answer is
remote
no.
control. Lots of
Yes,
stuff
I'll take
left
it.
over from a garage sale. Free mower, pickup only.
Floyd. Pick up where you left off.
All right.
Cool. All right. So that was just a little clip. The whole performance together with the multiple camera angles is about a little bit over an hour long in total. So I'll do a quick explanation of the set. So basically, as you could tell, the 2 performers were on stage wearing gorgeous coordinated white button-up shirts. I was a costume designer for this piece. It's a joke. Anyway, so they're wearing the 2 white shirts and khaki pants, and then I'm wearing all black. And then as you can see, there's microphones that are actually hidden around the perimeter of the space. So I'm kind of compressing this notion of sort of where the performance space is, and where the audience space is, and playing with this idea of who's supposed to be looked at. Something that was interesting to me about using the microphones was sort of making no attempt in trying to hide my presence during the whole duration of the piece, but kind of becoming like this voice of God type character where, when I speak into the microphone, the sound is being piped into the whole room, but there's this sort of reveal that's also happening because you can hear me louder than life, but also if you're sitting in the chairs, you can just like look over your shoulder and just see me right there. So it's sort of like this notion of like a deflated fantasy in a way, which I like because it sort of is a way for me to kind of poke at what's expected, right? Of when you go to a theater, you expect like a certain type of like heightened artifice, right? Like you go to see a show, you sit down, you look at the performers on stage, and it's a contract in a way. It's like you buy your ticket, you sit down, and sort of you're supposed to be like the passive viewer who's sort of just receiving the information. So what happens when I'm lighting the stage, treating the stage as the stage, but now there's this disruption where I'm sitting down, I'm shuffling through the crowd, sitting down and talking to people, interacting with the audience, with the performers through hand gestures, and then also like rupturing it again too with amplified sound. Yes, so I guess tying it back into the theme of this talk when it comes to collaboration, what was exciting to me about that work was a notion of chance, sort of conceptually, or like the idea behind trying to collect not only a script, but also to collect performers. I wanted it to be as fresh and frankly fun as possible. But in order to get a kind of performance like this to work, it does require a certain level of trust too. Something I want to highlight about the 2 performers that I used for that show. So Sylvia Carroll with the glasses and Floyd Lloyd, who also had glasses. I guess he was standing. That was they were doing something that not a lot of people actually can do. And over the years, I've worked with a lot of different performers, whether it's musicians or actors or dancers, and maybe some of the people who are watching this talk right now can relate. But for a lot of people, it's easier for them to be on stage when they feel like they have a clear vision of kind of what's happening, right? So I think actors, sorry if there's any actors here right now, I'll throw you under the bus just for a little bit, but sometimes people are very engaged in a story in the way that we're kind of taught in narrative, right? It's like, okay, like I'm cast in the role as the father of the family, and for the next hour and 45 minutes, we're going to act through this story of the father and the kids, and then one of the kids goes away, and then I'm sad about it, and then we all get struck by lightning and the house goes on fire, and that's the plot of the play, right? And so as the actor in that situation, you can kind of internalize the story, you can add notes, think of ways that you could sort of, that you would act if you're in a situation like that, right? But sort of what happens when you're a performer in the situation, and the whole point of this work is that everything is happening for the first time. And that does take a certain amount of confidence and sort of trust in the process, and also trust in each other too. I'm a firm believer in building a really nice kind of rapport with anybody that I work with, because especially working in performance, if I don't have people working with me, the show just can't happen. So for this work, Curb Alert, I just want to, even now years later, I'm still just in awe at sort of how quickly both Sylvia and Floyd were kind of able to jump into the process, accept it as sort of being something that was revolving around chance and kind of openness. And it was also their first time meeting as well, too. So you can think of all these different levels of nervousness or uncertainty that might have factored into the piece. And I'm really grateful to have been able to create and also share an environment with them that felt warm enough, but also generative enough to kind of get these really joyful, playful performances, which is what I wanted. There's no way people would have sat through that kind of work if my people were feeling, kind of closed, or if we weren't able to kind of convince the audience that, this is a journey, but, we're in it together and it's going to be enjoyable, right? Great. So before I keep going, I've been kind of monologuing for a while. Did anything pop into anyone's imagination or mind about that work? Have you seen anything like that before? Does it remind you of maybe different types of storytelling? Let's take a quick pause for any general question.
Anyone has a question, just feel free to unmute yourselves.
Elliot, can you ask the question again?
Oh yeah, for sure. I guess my question was just, does anyone have a general question? I compounded a few things into it, but I guess maybe did it make anyone think of anything, like another piece of art that they'd seen, or maybe a performance or a book that they'd read? Or not at all, too, that's valid.
I know. Hello.
Hey.
I noticed while during the performance, when you were sitting in the audience, you were kind of giving like these kind of hand signals like that. Is that kind of, and wasn't that like around the time when they comment, it was like yes or no or something like that? Was that like what that was supposed to indicate?
Alyssa, am I saying your name right?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Sharp eye. Yes, that is something that I actually taught the performers ahead of time. So another layer that I superimposed into this performance was a series of gestures. So it was, the answer is no, the answer is yes, and yes, I'll take it. So those texts were kind of a way for me to perform the performers, if that makes sense. They kind of turn into like an instrument, right? And inside this whole apparatus, where I'm inhabiting the space, not just as a performer, but also like a director. But yeah, the gestures were a part of it for sure. Then I see, sorry.
Two comments in the chat. One is love how compelling and funny this was, and another, it reminded me of improv class I took in high school.
Yes, it's giant improv class, for sure. Or a lot of people in this room did a lot of improv class in high school, or maybe people who do improv now, whether dance or acting?
I went to a lot of improv shows.
Yeah. It's kind of funny watching these videos now that like performance has become the forbidden medium because of COVID. So it's like a weird time capsule. I'm sure we'll get back to having people in the same room, but
I have a question about the performance, since you said it lasted almost an hour. So did the format change at all? And if it didn't, how did the tone in the room change over that hour period?
So part of the challenge of the piece, which made it fun to execute, was that the format didn't change. It's sort of once we open the curtain, everyone comes in, sits down, and then it's like all bets are off. Like we start the timer and we just go for it. So at a few points in the performance, it kind of got a little stretched out, I'll say. Like, for example, one time I took one of the performers off stage with a wireless microphone and we actually left and just left one performer on stage to read the rest of the script. But because there's wireless microphones at different points, we'd kind of have conversation from behind the walls. Towards the end, we started an imaginary nonprofit and sort of conceived this whole thing where we were going to have a fundraiser 5K, but then we needed to sell more bracelets to raise money, to raise awareness for the 5K that we're going to have. I guess something that you can maybe see a lot of in the first clip was I would also break in them reading the script, the hand gestures, to interview the performers as well. Just kind of asking them like about their pets, things that they like, favorite foods, allergies is something I use a lot. And so in a way, it's like us breaking this sort of character allows the people that I'm working with to kind of share a bit of themselves with the room too. And again, kind of pull at this idea of like, what is acting? Because it's clear that they're not reading a fictional script. Like it's stylized for sure, but I'm kind of slipping between like a more casual conversation and then this slightly more bizarre kind of improvisational exchange.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anna?
Did you pick the text from Craigslist kind of randomly, or did you kind of, what were the choices? How did you make your choices?
Yeah, I just picked it. I actually went through every morning when I was in Texas and then would copy and paste my favorite things. So I guess the editing came in through the computer, the way that I assembled it, but it was also a bit random too. I was limited to what was already being put up on the Craigslist site. And that was part of the fun for me of collecting the text. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to transition into another performance. So this one, I will play the whole video. This is another evening length work, about an hour, but I have like a 4-minute trailer. And this work's called America's Procession. So I'll just play the trailer for you, then explain it afterwards. that video really wanted to play a second time. Okay, so that work was made around the same time as the last video you saw. A little bit different in tone, maybe like not as joyful. But this piece, or the trailer that I just shared with you all, is called America's Procession, and it's named after my great grandmother on my mom's side, whose name is America Bell Miller. So her story is exciting or interesting to me, aside from the fact that we're related, but she was a self-taught musician, and she sang and wrote poetry and even spent some of her own money so many years ago to actually have a record pressed of her singing an old religious song. And I used to know which one it was, but I forgot. But she was the one who taught my grandmother how to read music and how to sing and play piano. And my grandmother was the person who taught me how to play the piano, which I credit as being my first introduction into art making, which is now, you know, one of my greatest loves in my career, which I'm so grateful for. So a few years ago, when I had the idea to make a piece that was engaging with her legacy and also trying to find a bit of a psychic connection behind why I might be making the work that I make, or trying to deepen a link with the past and not just things I'm interested in now, I decided to actually invite my great grandmother, America Bell Miller, to co-choreograph a performance for me. So her spirit actually was what made the piece look the way that it does. And I'll explain. The piece happened in a few different sections, which you can see by the colors changing on set. And every time the colors would change, my performers would line up and grab a note card that had a different character on it. And in the rehearsal period, I taught every performer every part of the piece, but it wasn't until we opened the curtain and started the performance that they would figure out who they'd be playing that evening. And that chance element, or like the randomness, is my great grandmother deciding the density of the work, right? I made sure everyone was prepared to do anything that they would have to do, but she ultimately decided when we started the piece what it would look like every time we did it. Another thing that was fun about that work for me was that it happened in 3 separate rooms. So this video trailer starts with my performers that are all dressed in black, kind of pushing behind a plastic curtain and ushering in the audience. But the first area was kind of like a lounge space. We had drinks set up, and there was the musician that sings at the end of the piece sang at the beginning. She played guitar and played a few songs. Then the performance started in the middle. And then after we get through the main dance section, the back room that was lit blue and green and had like the smoke machine in it was actually an aria that I had written. So it was kind of sung from the perspective of my great grandmother. I like wrote a letter to the room, kind of like using her voice that's like sung musically. So that piece was fun to make, basically because similar to the last work, Curb Alert, it relied a lot on sort of how willing and able the performers I used were to kind of jump into an unfamiliar process. And something that was exciting to me as a maker was kind of taking the extra hours and making sure that all of the steps, or like all of the characters that could be played out, everyone had a good handle on. So the people felt, I guess, like strong enough to kind of inhabit these characters when we pulled them out of the hat. Or it wasn't a hat, it was a bowl. But yeah, when they pulled their characters to the top of each section. Yeah, that was my first and probably last time working with a ghost, but it went well. You know, no worse off for it. Yes, I will pause there. Did that piece trigger anything for anyone? Was there something that someone noticed that jumped out? I'll pause for a really general question if anyone has one.
I was wondering how many different random parts that you have, and then how many actors that you have.
Thanks, Josh. So there were 6 actors. It was 1, 2, 6 actors, and I had a musician as well that did the score. And each section I think had 9 characters, so it was possible that not everybody would be picked, but everyone would always have someone to play.
Elliot, could you elaborate on some of the characters that we were seeing, like some of the actions or emotions specifically you're trying to get them to convey? I think I picked some of them up. I was just interested to hear what your thoughts were.
For sure. So all the choreography that I used in the piece came from a mix between my life and also stories that I'd read and was told about my great grandmother. So it was everything from like psychic breaks to relationships and sort of like people coming together, coming apart, people kind of like inhabiting the I don't want to say the spirit, but kind of like the energy of maybe some of my family members, like sort of an authoritarian presence. So you can think of it as like each person that in the studio I sort of highlighted, and then that person would get broken down into a series of adjectives. Like I'm making this up, but for an example, if I was going to make something about my mom, and I would try and think about her as like, okay, this is someone who's super organized. She works a lot with numbers, is really good at getting people together. This would kind of inspire the movement vocabulary that'd be attached with that name. And so when they pulled the mom card out of it, they would know, okay, this is when I have to do like a group work with somebody. There's like certain kinds of like quicker movements that are supposed to be in reference to someone counting something. Yeah, so started more literal, but then through the rehearsal process became a bit more abstract.
Something that stuck out to me was like the sort of, it was a little bit jarring to see joy and so much laughter, and then anger so close together. And I wonder how you thought about that in the piece.
Yeah, it's intense, but that's, it was also a really kind of extreme being in the room too, because it was really loud. But I don't know. I think like emotionally, I always keep going back to the word tear or something. Like I think about like tearing a sheet of paper or like a rip or something. It's like this feeling of like really deeply kind of like in your heart of hearts wanting to connect to a person who, in your mind, like means so much to you, but you'll never have access to. So my great grandmother is someone I've never met, but part of our relationship now is kind of my imagination about her and sort of like how her influence sort of might have helped me get to where I am now. So I think some of the emotional intensity you're mentioning is me trying to work through or kind of animate this feeling of like maybe longing or something, like wanting so close to like hold something, knowing I can't have it, and like having it be, in my DNA and my flesh, right? But still it's not something I can actually access, like not someone I can call on the phone or go visit. Cool. Hey, Grandma, if you're listening. Any other quick cues about that? And I'm happy to answer anything else that might be off topic as well. Yeah, I saw a hand.
I was just going to say, so I don't know if what we were seeing, were we seeing audience members? Like how was the audience positioned? Interactive, more passive in this one?
Mm-hmm. So for this performance, it was in like a large room, kind of like a gallery space that I subdivided in a few smaller sections. So technically the audience is passive, but the performance happened kind of in the same space that they were in. So there was even less of a stage than there was in the first performance. It was like the dancers and also the audience were all sitting or standing on the same floor. Cool. So I'm going to time travel a little bit now. Those last 2 videos are from work that I've been doing 2017 to 19. And so now I'm going to talk about a show that I have open right now. Get back to the handy dandy screen share here. Okay, so I'll get to the top. All right, so this is an exhibition that I have open right now here in New York at MoMA PS1, which was a massive undertaking given COVID and everything. It was supposed to open a year ago, but we finally made it happen. So this piece, I shouldn't say this piece, this installation is interesting to me because it sort of it's signaling my development out of someone who's just working in live space into someone who's translating the codes of my practice or sort of my interest into an installation setting. So this show, the group show, it's called This Longing Vessel. It's me and two other artists, E. Jane and Naldine Pierre, who are also in my cohort at the Studio Museum in Harlem. And in my room, I was researching a murder story that was happening in Los Angeles about this guy named Ed Buck. Well, the story's not about him. It's actually about the victims who lost their lives, which were Jamel Moore and Timothy Dean. So I was living in LA for about 6 years before I relocated to New York to spend a year working on this project. And okay, let me actually, I'm going to pause the share just because I feel like it's easier for me to talk when I'm looking at the room. But anyway, this murder case was interesting to me because it brought up a lot of questions about power and value and sort of who's seen as a worthy life within the eyes of the government. So Ed Buck was a gay man living, or is, he's still alive, living in West Hollywood, California, who was forcibly injecting Black male sex workers with methamphetamine and basically causing people to overdose inside of his apartment. So that is already evil and heinous enough in himself, right? That his fetish like wasn't just racialized, but also what he was trying to do with kind of injecting people with meth like beyond their limits was to kind of render the body unusable, right? Like almost like turning these people into puppets, right? Or just like objects for him to use until their hearts literally couldn't take it anymore. So the first time the story got my attention was some local activists actually started staging protests outside of his home when Jamel Moore, who was 26 at the time, was found dead inside of Ed Buck's apartment. What's insane about this is that his body was found sort of face down on a mattress. He was naked and Ed Buck was still alive. They recovered drugs at the residence. So they had baggies with residue, there was needles, the whole shebang, but Ed Buck didn't actually get taken into custody. It was sort of ruled an accidental overdose. And so the coroners actually took the body away and Ed Buck was fine, right? Like there was no way to prove, they said, that he was the one who caused this. So time keeps going. He keeps on this pattern. And then a few months later, actually, another person, Timothy Dean, who was age 55, similar situation, was hired like as a sex worker by Ed Buck and was forcibly injected with crystal meth again, also had an overdose and passed away in the apartment. Same situation, same room, everything. Again, the police did absolutely nothing. And this was over a year later. They found the guy there, they found needles, everything else. They're like, well, that's weird. There's a dead person on the floor. Like, I guess call us next time. Sorry. So Ed Buck walks free again. Nothing happens. And then so the third time, well, actually, if you read the police reports, it's more than 3 times. But another person actually was having an overdose, but before passing away, was able to escape the apartment and literally crawled to a payphone and called 911. And it wasn't until this third person who called the police and was able to kind of stay nearby until the police came was that Ed Buck actually was taken into police custody. So for me, it's just so abundantly, I mean, it's just disgusting kind of how it literally took like a glitch in the system in a way for this man who was literally a murderer to get sent to jail. It's like two Black persons found deceased in an apartment weren't enough to press charges, but it was only when someone who maybe should have died in the eyes of law enforcement didn't actually complete that task. It kind of broke the cycle. And then that's when they had living, breathing proof that this person was a criminal. So that really got me thinking sort of about that case, which is still happening. He hasn't been brought to trial. He's still awaiting trial right now in California, but also thinking a lot about the ways that we experience kind of notions of pain through the internet, specifically through news channels and social media. I'm sure everyone here already knows this, but Instagram, Facebook, like these are not free platforms. Like they're corporations that make money by directing our attention towards advertising that we click on and buy goods, right? So it's not altruistic, right? Like the goal of Instagram is not to actually share with you what your friends and family are doing. It's to sort of try and manipulate your emotions and guide you towards product. And when I think about, people losing their lives, whether it's like through war or this murder case I'm researching or any kind of tragedy, I just had to ask myself, like, is it possible to sum up a life, in a hashtag or like in the length of a tweet or like a story update? Like, can you actually accurately express, the terror and the pain that goes along with sort of someone losing 55 years of life on this earth? And, in my heart of hearts, I really don't believe that it's possible. But here we are, like constantly getting these things that sort of develop over years and months reduced to like a perfectly square set of pixels. And somehow that's supposed to be a stand-in for true information. And it was really disgusting me. So I'm going to go back to the share screen. Out of that research and kind of personal disgust is where this work came from. So I'll start with the walls. In this installation, the walls are actually an artwork, and it's a piece called Hue, which is from last year. So I used a computer to take a digital scan of my right hand, which is my dominant hand, and sort of turn the color of my skin into a paint that's coating the walls of the space. So you can think of my flesh kind of becoming almost like leather or something, right? Like I've turned something that's of my body into a material and kind of like stretched it thin over the edges of the wall. On the floor here, if you can see my mouse, that little hole with the light on it is a performance called Hole, where I actually took a sledgehammer and broke into the walls of the museum and lit it from behind. So when you walk into the room, it's kind of glowing and giving this sort of hint at like a world outside of the gallery. But if you bend down and look through the hole, you can actually only see the concrete. It's installed in such a way that no matter how you crane your head, you'll either bump into the wall or see a corner before you can actually see what's behind it, which again is tying into this idea of sort of like the promise of a reveal, or like the promise of truth, but never actually getting access to it. This red work right here is a piece in a series called Placeholders. This is number 1, which is nudity. What's interesting to me about this surface is that it's a polished aluminum, so it's really shiny, and it's covered with a similar paint, like car paint. But inside the sign, the text is made out of a reflective vinyl, which is the same thing that you would see on a street sign, like something that your car would light up at night. So something I did here that was specific for the artwork is that I matched the surface of the metal to the reflective lettering. So at certain angles, it's almost like the text disappears, but at the same time, it's too big and too bright to kind of ignore. Which again, tying to these sort of deep, ominous feelings of just being shown so much and like being exposed to social media or news articles that's like promising you the access of truth, but it's kind of hiding as much information as it's revealing to you. And then on the floor is a piece called End-to-End Encrypted Lot's Wife. which is one of my first sculptures I've gotten to show, which is exciting. But it's my body weight in rock salt, and then on top of it are my clothes. And there's also a performance element to this piece. I sang a love song to a couple that I was seeing pre-COVID. I was traveling back and forth and maintaining a romantic relationship, but once COVID started, I wasn't able to travel as much. And so, or who am I saying as much at all? I haven't left New York. So this piece pulls from the biblical story of Lot's wife, which if anyone's familiar, it's sort of when God sends angels down to destroy the city of Sodom and Gomorrah cities. And the angels basically warn Lot. They're like, look, buddy, things are about to get really crazy, but you helped us out. So here's the deal. Pack up your stuff, leave this town as fast as you can, because tomorrow we're going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. But there's only one rule you have to follow. Like, if we're going to help you out, you cannot look back once we start, destroying the city, and then you'll be able to get away safe, promise. So Lot and his family, pack up, under cover of night, famously, and prepare to leave, because it's like the word of God through the angels or whatever that they're going to destroy these cities. But Lot's wife was the only one who kind of was unable to escape the destruction of her hometown without looking back, or kind of having this feeling of loss, right? Like, over her home. And as punishment, she's turned into a pillar of salt on the spot, while Lot and I think his daughters are able to escape. So this pile, you can kind of think of it as like my body's been like calcified, or sort of like turned to dust under this pressure, or sort of like under this challenge of wanting to look back at something that was like, so beautiful and so comfortable, and in a way I can still access it, but by trying to continue in a certain way, I'm kind of maybe destroying myself in the process a bit. So yeah, that sculpture is it's like a time marker, like a version of me died, but another version kind of gets to continue. And then lastly on this wall is a 5-channel video installation that I made in collaboration with Jack Quartet, which is an amazing experimental quartet here in New York, where I'm reading an essay that I wrote about the murder case I mentioned, and also a few other things. So this is the other half of the room. This is the second sign in the Placeholders series, Blood. Same thing. I color matched a blue reflective vinyl to a blue metal, and it kind of has this like optic effect, like it appears and reveals and disappears at the same time. Close up of Lot's wife. So this piece, which is called Supernumerary, is what I'll kind of focus on, because that's what has the most collaboration, I guess, within this installation. I'm at the center of these five panels of videos, and then on each of my sides on the left and right are musicians of the string quartet. So what I'm doing is I'm directly addressing the viewer, sort of reading, telling the story of these murders, but also talking about some of my other thoughts around reproduced images of pain, and sort of what it means to get information through the internet, and how, especially as a Black person, a queer person, or for other people of color, minorities, like what it means to sort of have your image or yourself kind of essentialized and stretched across a lot of different media. This performance, and I'll show you a clip of it a little bit later, is cool because I actually developed some of the same hand gestures that I was using in the Curb Alert piece for this work. I'll pause the screen share, and then I have a short clip of the video on the wall that I'll share with you all. So give me 1 second here. For a deranged white man of means, it's the perfect double taboo. Ed finds sexual gratification by transforming Black men into avatars, injecting his prey with the stereotypes projected upon our bodies. Within the safety of his home, Buck is able to act out the desire for black flesh while illuminating his fear of that very desire. Within seconds, the conscious and capable body turns to clay within Ed Buck's fingers. Forcibly tranquilized, Buck's victims are rendered abstract within his mind, becoming breathing sex objects for as long as their hearts allow. In the months following Jamel's death, his mother and others pressed for a proper investigation. The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office refused to press charges, citing a lack of evidence, even though drugs were recovered at the residence. A formal criminal charge never appeared. In January 2019, Timothy Dean, aged 55, was found dead in Ed Buck's apartment, face down in the same room, having suffered from an overdose. Miraculous. Cool. So stop sharing that. So that can maybe share some of the text if anyone wants to read it. Let me know. I have the whole thing typed out. But yeah, that was a moment where I kind of got to use my performance background and now get to extend it into other medium, still working with other people, but thinking about liveness in like a slightly different, kind of more strategic way. That was a lot, and also tonally a lot different than the last couple of pieces. So any comments, any quick thoughts? I can pause before I keep going. Does anyone maybe relate to this feeling or some of the feelings I talked about of feeling like an inability to kind of access true information through social media, through the internet in some way?
That's a great question. I really would encourage the students to think about that, since, you know, there's so much social media being used, especially with the rise of TikTok during the pandemic. So for the students, you know, can you think about that question in the context of your lives? Do you feel like some or all of the information maybe isn't true? Like, how does it feel looking for information on those sites?
I was just going to say that I really appreciate how you were playing with materiality and evoking the kind of maybe a more complicated and authentic kind of grief than, you know, the hashtag or the meme or the, you know, somebody who's lost their life. It's an image. It becomes this kind of iconic image. It's just so the piece feels so moody and thick and complicated. I would love to come see it. I don't know how long it's going to be at MoMA PS1.
Yeah, thank you. It's up for 2 more weeks till March, I think 14th, unless we get extended. Fingers crossed. But
I was able to see it. I really encourage people to go. Timed entrances, all that. Make a reservation. MoMA PS1 in Queens. I do want to read the comment in the chat. There was a comment. It says, yes, I find that relatable, especially in terms of it being ever present and inescapable, but watered down. So it's exhausting, even though we aren't truly educated on a lot of the information we come across.
yeah, Stephanie gets it. Absolutely. And you know what, what can we do, right? Especially when the way that we've been trained is to constantly go back to these sites to get information. And I am a firm believer that nothing is inevitable. And sort of through this artwork, it's my goal to kind of highlight my frustration, but also to assert that just because things are the way they are now doesn't mean that it's the way that things have to be, you know, and we have the ability to decide, you know, what information we consume and how we consume it. Because, you know, it hasn't always been this way. And, you know, maybe it won't be this way in the future too, hopefully.
I really love that comment that nothing is inevitable. I think that is like actually like without being like over enthusiastic, it's like cynically hopeful.
Yeah. Cynically hopeful is good. Think of everything that all of us have learned, whether it's like, I learned how to use TikTok like 10 months ago or whatever. Like, I didn't even know that that was a thing like 2 years ago, but now here it is. It's on my phone and it's not leaving. So it does leave sometimes. I have to take breaks. But I think it's just something that's really given me hope, I guess, like looking forward, even pre-COVID, but especially now, it's like nothing is always the way it is, if that makes sense. And if you can imagine a future for yourself, you have the ability to kind of enact that. And sometimes, airing grievances or sort of trying to think critically about what's happening in front of you is a good way to start conversations about how you might want things to change. Okay, here is an interesting question. Has anyone ever felt directly manipulated by something that they saw on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok? Like here's an example. I was with a friend over the summer who was talking about jumpsuits, like offhandedly wanting to buy jumpsuits, and then within a day later was getting advertisements for jumpsuits on Instagram. None of this is a coincidence, but I wonder if anybody has had a similar experience, something they texted to someone that maybe came up in an ad or saw a strange mirroring between real life and sort of an app.
That actually has happened to me before, and I get so creeped out because I was looking at dresses on Safari, and then all of a sudden I go on my Instagram and there's like ads for a bunch of like different boutiques, and I'm like, how did they know that I was looking for like dresses? It's so weird.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. And I think I want to support you in saying that like it's not an accident that that's happening to you.
It's like we're just always being listened to creepily. Like that's why I don't have the Alexa. She creeps me out too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So once I was taking a bath and I wanted to have some relaxing music, so I wasn't hearing what everything else was going on in the house. So I brought my phone in to play some music, and I cover it up because there's no way I want like a camera or anything,
Yeah.
After that, I received so many ads for these jet pool bathtubs. And I was totally freaked out that they were listening to running water. Yeah. And that this was, quite intrusive.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, the microphone's on, like you bring up a good point, but like running water, but also like location tags that are on our devices. So like if they knew that you were home and heard running water, maybe like that was enough information to infer that perhaps you were taking a bath. Maybe you even mentioned it to someone, which should be your right, to talk to someone in your home or a friend, but that's yeah, that's a little creepy. Yeah.
We have some in the chat. I'll read. My TikTok is extremely tuned in to what my interests are and targeting this interest. Stephanie, Amanda, it happened to me all the time. It's very weird. Jordan, yes, that has happened to me. I was talking about wanting to play a board game. Then I got an advertisement for the mobile version of that game that night.
Mm-hmm. So
they're not trying to hide it.
No, not at all. And, even though these are, in my opinion, kind of nightmarish situations that you all have outlined where, you've been pointed towards products, right? If this is what's happening with something that, in air quotes, doesn't matter, right? Like a dress or a new bathtub or a board game, imagine like what that means for the type of news media you're getting or any other kind of information. If the goal is to kind of get a certain reaction out of you based on what these applications gauge as being your interest, it's like, oh, like, this person has a younger sister, so I'm going to link to a really salacious article about like, attacks on younger siblings going up like 20%, in like the Northeast United States, right? And, if I click on that Guardian article or whatever, there's like ad revenue tied to it. Because even if you don't click a pop-up, just passive attention is a way that certain websites can get money that goes back to the website, but also to the apps as well. And I feel like I'm probably preaching to the choir, but all of you are used to using the internet, so you know how easy it is to post something. So if your only goal was to produce an article or a piece of information that's just to titillate a reader, right? If you just, even if it's not true, if you got a bunch of people to click on it, that's a lot of money, a lot of revenue. And then, if a lot of the ads too are run by companies by Amazon or Facebook's, like when you see those little small rectangles like at the bottom of an article on a news website. Amazon Web Services is a big one. Facebook has their own version too, but those companies also manage those ads that are tied into the things that are already being shown to you through the other apps. It's like tennis. They're just like slapping like the stuff back and forth across the net, like all of your interests, and trying to target you from like so many angles, even ones that, unfortunately we probably don't realize too. But it doesn't have to be that way. I still like firmly believe, but it is something to be critical of and something to talk about. And, when people, in the case I'm researching, in a case where people are actually dying, what might have happened if, proper news coverage was given, or like what could have been different if like word could have gotten out somehow. I don't know, unfortunately. One last thing, I could talk about this stuff forever, or specifically like how distrustful I am of social media and the internet. Who remembers when Facebook switched from just using their like button to having the haha, the heart, the thumbs down, things like that? Speaking of emojis, you can like do like a thumbs up or do one of these. So that change was actually super intentional. I was reading an essay about this recently, but there's a reason why Facebook was only built with a like button and not a dislike button. It's because it did research and figured out that people were more likely to want to use the site if they're receiving positive reinforcement, which is a thumbs up. So if I posted something and I get a like click on it, that's sort of like it's like the human version of like a dog treat that keeps coming back. So what the scientists and researchers at Facebook realized is that they could actually figure out more about the emotional states of their users and manipulate them more for advertising by adding these other reactions, I guess. So it's helping the company in two ways. It's like not only is it giving this sort of like elevated level of feedback to the poster, which again encourages people to want to post more, but they're also, without having a human available to read every single post, just by you clicking on that, it's able to kind of give the information back to Facebook as being like, okay, like when these certain words are used in text, that tends to elicit like a haha reaction, or it tends to elicit like a heart reaction. And so like this starts to become like a bulleted list. So if I hearted every time I saw a dog or something, that now gets added to my file on these websites as being like, oh, we know that we can sell Elliot on dog ads because he has a strong emotional attachment to dogs. And, when he feels like, he's in a candid space or talking with friends or family or whatever, and is reacting with the heart emoji with dogs, there's like an 80% chance or whatever that he'll probably be more likely to engage with it. Or same thing if something's funny, right? And so when all of this information is tagged in with the posts, which are being scanned at all times by, code or like robots, right? For simple words like, I love it when, or I hate it when this, things like that. They're able to organize the algorithm kind of emotionally and sort of strategically place things out as you're scrolling in a way where it's like, okay, I hear a sad post about, someone's pet dying, but then the next one, it's like, oh, my friend just got a new car. And then like, oh, this other thing happened. And it sort of is, emotionally like making you ride this like borderline with a goal of just like shopping at the end. And as an artist, it's kind of disconcerting because I'm in, the business of creating images and creating ideas. And so there's this kind of like promise that somehow by sharing things online, I'm supposed to get access to a larger audience. But unfortunately, it kind of feels that the second I share certain things online, it almost no longer belongs to me, right? It just becomes something to be reacted to by other people. And once that happens, it's sort of a tool to sell like more web services, or, you know, a slightly more lame thing too. It's like when certain things get shared, it then becomes like part of like the public imagination or something, right? Like it's hard to hold on to an object or an idea now in the way that you could have held on to an object like a painting or something in the past, where there's only one and it goes on a wall and everyone can have it. But it's a little trickier when you're dealing with things that can't be had or things that can't be held. Tangent. All right, I'm back. Yeah. But that's all, a lot of thoughts below the surface.
I just want to comment, like, before you move on, something that I took away and we've talked about is that, you know, you're talking about putting an image online and having that sort of surrendered into the ether and to other people's reactions. And I think since we're all digital creators on social media and stuff, it's really interesting to just put that in our heads and think about, like, what agency do we have as just people online sharing things, and just being aware that what we're sharing is ours, but also doesn't belong to us after it's out there all the time. And I think it's just a really interesting thing to recognize as for everybody here as like digital creators. Like what we're making is ours, but it's not. It belongs to the online space and whatever people choose to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that can be as scary or as exciting as you want it to be. For me, it's kind of scary, but there's ways around it too. Like I forget his name, David. I forgot David's last name, but there's an artist based in Los Angeles who doesn't make a lot of digital work. He's like kind of a poet, and forgive me, I forgot his last name, but he started a gallery in a handbag. So how it worked is that different artists would come and submit works, or he would collect them, whether it's like a little book or a tiny sculpture or a painting or something. And so for the duration of the show, like for a month, this object would go into a handbag. And then if you wanted to see the gallery, you just have to email him and then arrange a meeting. Then he'd open the bag and show you what's inside. And for a month, that's what you could see. Then after, they'd change it to something else. So this is, I guess I brought it up, it's the extreme opposite of kind of like, you know, having something like widely shared online, but, you know, it's a way for someone to express an intimate moment of sharing or kind of creative expression outside of this space. Is he getting it up to sell hand lotion on TikTok? Probably not, but it's a fun project nonetheless. Okay. I will end. Well, does anyone else have anything to say either about that last collection of work or anything before I end with one last little work sample? No. Okay, so keeping with tonight's theme of having aggressive tonal shifts, I'm gonna end with like a kind of more upbeat performance that I made this year. This is a piece called Internal Recreation, and I will share it now. 1 second here.
Well, we're just gonna like, well actually, this is the last. Yeah. Yeah. I could be tireder, but we'll stick with the score. The score said 4 times.
Let's stick with the score.
Yeah. Okay, is your camera ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so you start rolling, I'm recording, and then you can start recording too.
I'll start rolling now.
Yeah, start now.
Recording J. Should I be recording you?
This one's recording too. You're all recording?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna play the last like 2 seconds in the previous track. Okay, so we're gonna have a 10-second lead-in break. 3, 2, 1.
You need to rest, yeah.
Great. This is kind of a funny sculpture. Yeah.
I'm gonna shop with that. Yeah.
All right. Yay. No more doom and gloom, huh?
It's so catchy, I'm still singing it in my head.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, hand clap emojis. Any thoughts? I'll not talk first this time. How about that?
I feel like I'm talking too much, but internal recreation, that is just such a great invitational something. I'm just so, I love that idea of internal recreation. So I'm interested to know what you might say about it, but I also loved watching you kind of freely physically exploring what seemingly is an empty room and different ways to use the things in the room in some new ways as well.
This was semi-unintentional, but I like internal recreation as a phrase now coming in counterpoint to everything I was just talking about with like getting so much external, right? That from social media or companies, right? And thinking about a way to reclaim a place of like creativity and like generative space, like from the inside. The performance, that video recording came out of a place of difficulty, specifically through COVID time, figuring out how to kind of like stage a live event within digital space, which in my mind isn't really possible. So the video is a bit of a visual pun in a way. It's like I'm giving a certain level of energy that like one might attribute to like a live concert or like a performance or something, but the reveal is that it is performed in an empty room, in this case my studio, and also the two camera people in the performance are both creating the image, but are also a part of the image when I cut between the close-ups of me, but also the zoomed out shot where it's kind of like a dead reveal of like, this is just like three people in an empty room. But at split second moments, you get, like there's like a sweat, there's close-up, there's excitement where like it's almost like faking, right? Like this sort of like live experience and then switching back and forth between like the real and then like the imitation in real time.
I'll say something because it's on my mind, but I really hope some students talk, ask some questions. I like the idea that like misinformation is getting me down, because I think misinformation is usually thought about in such a logical sense of like, well, it's misinformation and we don't know what the truth is. What is the truth? And it's sort of this tone of logic. And it's like, oh, well, that's actually emotional if you're saying, oh, misinformation is getting me down. And then we see that emotion in your movements. And I just love that, flipping that concept or taking it out of its usual context and presenting it in a really emotional way.
Thank you. I think what you're saying too resonates with my own research and basically talking about misinformation is now something that can happen to you, which even like 15 years ago, like was not a thing, right? Like if someone lied to your face, it's one thing, but now it's just becoming increasingly clear that unfortunately we're not always in control over what information we're being subjected to. And that has repercussions in like the way that we act, the way that we think, sometimes the way that we perceive ourselves, unfortunately.
I don't mind taking like a little time to let people think. Something that I practice in my class, and I have a lot of my students here, is critical response theory, and just thinking about like first reactions and what are you noticing about the piece. And I think what's nice is in the piece, you let us sort of respond before explaining too much. You haven't said too much. So I wonder if there's some students from my classes who could use that concept and maybe approach step one of like, what do you notice about the piece that we just saw, or anything else that stuck out to you in the presentation? We have a couple comments in the chat. One's from Stephanie. It reminded me of a drag ball culture a little bit with the style of movement. Deanna appreciated the sense of play, allowing body to be so responsive and revealing all the seams of production, seeing camera people set up, etc., which is really meaningful. Jordan, something I noticed was everybody was wearing coordinated striped shirts. Thanks, Jordan. And Jared, was there any significance to the chairs you ended up using and interacting with?
Yeah, I'll touch on what Jordan and Jared said. So excellent job, Jordan. If I had gold stars, I'd send you one through the computer. But yeah, the reason why everyone was wearing striped shirts is I kind of was hinting at the idea of us being in costume, but not really. So we're matching in an intentional way, but we're all wearing different colors, which links back to this idea of kind of being like it's like half of performance, but it's also just 3 people in a room. And like how little could I give the viewer to sort of show them that this is intentional while still leaving a little bit of space for ambiguity. So yeah, that was a choice, the striped shirts. Thanks for noticing that. And then the chairs. I mean, I like chairs. I sit in them all the time. I think as objects, they're really interesting sculpturally because they're one of the few things that directly point to what their use is, if that makes sense. Or like when you see a chair, you kind of know like where a body is supposed to go on it because we're so familiar to how these work. In this performance, I like that I was able to just pull extra chairs that I just had in the studio, but it kind of gives like almost like a false sense of audience at the end. Like it becomes a sculpture in their room, but it's again referencing back to this like this presence of people that aren't there or can't be there, for various reasons. Various reasons is COVID. Why I'm like, not just call it what it is, Elliot. It's COVID.
I was wondering if maybe some of Elliot's work and his ideas are inspiring some of your own creative ideas. Those of you who are making things, does it make you think about doing maybe a new kind of experiment or a collaboration, right? I was thinking about the soft power, the title. Actually, I would love to ask you a little bit more about the facilitatrix.
Facilitatrix, yeah.
Yes. But I don't know if the students have some new ideas. I certainly am full of new ideas after watching your work.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm here to share with everybody, and I think that there's a lot of folks that I was exposed to through my own work and life and research into expanding notions of what art can be and how it can live in a gallery or anywhere else. And I kind of exposed myself to Amanda earlier. The Facilitatrix was a pun on Enter the Matrix for the title of the talk, but I do take soft power and facilitating quite seriously in my work. And in different ways in each of these performances that I shared today, I picked pieces that sort of highlighted interactions with other people, whether it was from like the super loose, like from Curb Alert, the first piece where the people were wearing white and it was Craigslist, where I was kind of just making a space where the performers could they were reading my script, but also it was about them being themselves, to something that's more composed, like when I was working with the string quartet, to something kind of in between with this last piece. And like the two cinematographers are sort of the people that are both making the work and also performing. I think that trust, communication, playfulness, openness are all super valuable tools that we all have that kind of can be used to our advantage, whether it's like if you need help recording something or an extra set of hands or whatever. But I think that working with other people or trying to think creatively of how you can engage with others through art making is a way to kind of strengthen your own production, right? Because you can use your own skills and kind of multiply it by everyone else that's in the production. I don't always work with other people, but especially during this time, it's been something that's been giving me a lot of joy and pleasure in doing. And also too, even if you're not making performance, I think just exploring ideas from a place of joyfulness and openness is sometimes the best way to crack open a new thought. It doesn't have to be super serious. Sometimes you can just do something and then the intent can reveal itself after you're finished.
I really appreciate that description, because I think what, a lot of the students here are learning new technologies for the first time, or new concepts of performance or art. And so it can be, I think a lot of people sometimes want to find out the intent or the solution or whatever they're thinking about before it starts. And I think that can inhibit the work a little bit. And something that we try to talk about a lot is that playfulness. I just wanted to acknowledge that, and thank you for sharing that, because I think being playful and like cracking a thought open like an egg, I love that analogy, is such a great place to start from, especially when you're doing anything new, whether it's with tool or material or with thought.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Are there any other questions from the audience, students who want to put it in the chat? Just wanted to ask you one more question before maybe we wrap up. Can you talk about the lyrics in your last video a little bit more?
Oh yeah. Speaking of playfulness, that song's actually 7 years old, and it was just through COVID time that I thought to let me make this into a music video. It's just about online dating, to be honest. Sort of when I first made it, I was just like, I've always been what am I trying to say? I have like a really complicated relationship with technology. Not so much in this work, but I have done a lot of things with computer programming and sort of like I do video editing and a little bit of animation now. But I always get really frustrated with like this potential of kind of reaching a broader audience or like engaging with people, but also I'm a bit like resistant to it. I'm definitely not a Luddite, but it's yeah, it's this bit of push and pull, right? It's like I want to feel like I'm accessing like all like 535 flavors of what the world has to offer, but at the same time, like I really do believe in myself. And that's not just to say myself, but also like the believing in the spirit of like everybody on this earth and be like, okay, like this can't be the only way though. It's like why do I have to believe that the only way to meet someone new is by like going through like this program when like we're all in the same city anyway? Like I don't get it. Like this can't be true. So I just, it's push and pull. There's like some like little like snarky moments, some like more introspective ones, but that was the jumping off point. And then maybe just through songwriting, it got a little bit more abstract. But I specifically remember when I did write that song 7 years ago, that's what I was like, why? Like, why is this? Like, it's so cool, but also like, ugh, like, this can't be it. And then, yeah, internal recreation. It's like that space of just like, you know, that infinite wellspring of like joy and sort of like self-fullness or something that, what's a better word for that? Honesty or being self-actualized, or you know, when you're like really aligned with like your interest and your purpose, and sort of like that's the thing that leads you to where you need to go, and not a sense of lack, right? Or like, oh, I have to go online and shop for something because I don't have it.
I think self-actualization is like the medical or psychological term for it, but I like the word self-fullness a lot.
Yeah.
So I love that you put that out there. Unless there's any other questions, I think this is like a natural maybe stopping point. I just want to thank you so much for sharing with us. I'm gonna go ahead and put the clapping emoji and ask everyone to join me. Really appreciate your time, and I love seeing work that I haven't seen before, and like your new things. And yeah, I hope to hopefully you'll be back at Monmouth sometime in the future. And thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who's been here and participated.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope to get down there soon, do a real workshop sometime.
Yeah, it'd be really fun to have you and this kind of maybe a workshop at Monmouth in the future. That would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elliot.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.